stunning award-winning documentaries. Why Stories on BBC World News.
This is BBC News, broadcasting to viewers in the UK and around the world. I'm Jane Hill. The headlines. Iranian state television says the country's supreme leader has pardoned thousands of prisoners, including many who'd taken part in the recent anti-government demonstrations. New CCTV pictures of the missing Lancashire woman Nicola Bulley have been shared by one of her friends. The images show the 45-year-old in the hours before she went missing, next to the River Wyre 9 days ago. Union leaders in the UK urge the Prime Minister to intervene in the dispute about healthcare pay. The biggest week of strikes in the history of the National Health Service is due to begin on Monday. And the former President of Pakistan, General Pervez Musharraf, has died at the age of 79 after a long illness.
And in sport, Harry is a history maker. Kane becomes Spurs' all-time top scorer as his side beat Manchester City in the English Premier League.
Hello, welcome to BBC News. Iran's supreme leader is pardoning a large number of prisoners, including some people arrested in the last few months of protests. The pardon by Ayatollah Khamenei comes on the eve of the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in 1979, a date on which he regularly offers an amnesty to some prisoners. But the Iranian state media says it does exclude people facing charges of spying for foreign agencies, murder, or destruction or arson of state property. Well, Taraneh Stone, who's from the BBC's Persian service, has been giving us more details.
The Supreme Leader has agreed to pardon and commute sentences of tens of people who are in prison or they're waiting for sentences. The letter from the judiciary said that a considerable number of people who were arrested and imprisoned in relation to the recent protests are among these people. But there is a long list of conditions for these people to be pardoned. One of those conditions is that they shouldn't be linked to any spying activity. They shouldn't be facing any charges of corruption on earth or waging war against God. As you can see, these are quite ambiguous charges as well, and people have been charged with these accusations for setting fire on bins in the street or merely protesting. So these are quite ambiguous charges. They're also, one of the conditions is that they have to, these people have to show remorse, and also they have to provide a written promise that they will not participate in the protest or take similar actions again. And that's what has raised some concerns among social media users and people who have been listening to the news today, and said that this can potentially be problematic and it can potentially be a long process and maybe even impossible for some people to be pardoned or released.
Well, let's talk about this further with Nina Navid, who joins me, an Iran expert from Amnesty International, based here in the UK. Nina, thank you for your time. We do generally get some pardons around this point in the year. How significant is it, do you feel, that some of the people being pardoned did actually take part in those demonstrations?
So you're right. We do usually get pardons around around the anniversary of the revolutions, which is 22 Bahman, which will be on the 11th of February, and usually around Nowruz, New Year's as well. But it's rare for them to pardon those involved in political protests. So I think it's interesting that they've said that they will include those involved said, there's this long list of conditions. The pardons do not extend to those who have received capital charges, so those who have already received death sentences. And, you know, one of the conditions is that you have to show remorse and apologize for your offences. So let's really see what comes out of these promises and if the government really will follow through with them.
And so is this even announced for international consumption?
I think it is, and I think the timing is very relevant, actually. So yesterday we had a major opposition figure in Iran, so Mir Hossein Mousavi, who was one of the leaders of the Green Reformist movement in Iran and a presidential candidate in 2009. He came out yesterday and said, do you know what? There's no chance of a viable alternative working within the current Islamic regime. He urged for fundamental change. He urged for a new constitution and a constitutional assembly based on the premise of woman, life, freedom. And that's huge for somebody who's the leader of the reformist movement to come out and say, look, it's just not possible to work within the current confines of the Islamic regime. I think that really reflects the sentiment, not just of the protesters, but of the national mood.
And how many people does Amnesty International believe is currently in detention as a direct result of those anti-government protests that, of course, we've been witnessing and people have seen images around the world?
Right. So we've said it's, you know, up to tens of thousands, and that's based on kind of leaked recordings. So up to tens of thousands have been detained as part of the protests, unfairly so, just simply for exercising their right to freedom of assembly and freedom of expression. And of course, hundreds were killed as part of those protests. Lethal force was used against protesters. Live bullets were used and hundreds were killed. And of course, four young protesters were arbitrarily executed, hung in secret, and many more are at risk. We've said that at least 14 are at imminent risk of execution, including Mohamed Gobadlu, who has mental health concerns as well. He remains at imminent risk of execution. And we know, for example, these pardons do not extend to those who've received death sentences and who've, you know, received those sentences as a result of torture, tainted confessions. You know, we've recorded that these individuals have been raped, have been tortured, have been flogged, and as a result have confessed for crimes which are not, of course, they've simply been you know, involved in peaceful protest. And they, you know, the government has said that they are not subject to these pardons. Really, the government needs to drop all the charges, quash convictions and death sentences against all those involved in peaceful protest.
Nina Navid, thank you for your time from Amnesty International. Thank you. Here in the UK, new pictures of Nicola Bulley, who went missing while walking next to a river in Lancashire, have been released, showing her on the morning of her disappearance. Police say their working assumption is that she fell accidentally into the river. Many members of the local community have again today joined in the search to find her. A key witness who was seen pushing a pram close to where Nicola Bulley disappeared 9 days ago has come forward. Here's Danny Savage.
This is Nicola Bulley leaving home on the day she vanished, setting off on the school run, putting her spaniel Willow in the boot. Her family today released these pictures to show exactly what she was wearing. For days, police have been searching for any trace of the mother of two young girls. Today was no different. What did seem very obvious was the large number of other people out too.
This is the bench where Nikki's mobile phone was found a week last Friday. Today is dry, it's sunny, and the number of people out along here is extraordinary. There are dozens and dozens of people along this stretch, along the other stretches as well, all walking the riverside paths to try and assist in the search.
I mean, I know if I went missing in the same way, I would be expecting people to go looking. Do you understand what I mean? I would really want there to be a search party.
It was myself or my eldest who we both take the dogs out on our own. If it was one of us that was in that situation, I'd hope the community did the same thing for us as well. And I just feel like everybody should be doing their part.
She disappeared without trace. Police believe she accidentally fell in the River Wyre, but it's the not knowing for sure which is keeping people looking. Danny Savage, BBC News.
Pakistan's former President General Pervez Musharraf has died following a long illness. He was 79. President Musharraf seized power in a bloodless military coup in 1999 and served in office for 7 years from 2001. At the time of his death, he was living in exile in Dubai. Let's discuss his legacy with Hussein Haqqani, who is a former ambassador for Pakistan to the United States. He's now director of the Hudson Institute for South and Central Asia, a think tank based in Washington. Thanks so much for joining us. Your view, sir, on the legacy of Pervez Musharraf?
For his admirers, General Musharraf was the man who brought some semblance of stability to Pakistan in the aftermath of 9/11, when he leveraged Pakistan's position by realigning with the United States. For his critics and opponents, which are numerous as well, he was the man who overthrew the constitutional order, promised to bring democracy to Pakistan, stabilize its economy, and end terrorism, and failed on all three counts.
Failed on all three counts. And talk to us, if you could, about the role of the military and the was it augmented under his period?
General Musharraf took over after 10 years of bad civilian rule, and then he went on to govern with the help of Pakistan's intelligence services and the military. The intrusion of the military in public life increased under him, and it is a legacy that persists. Pakistan's military continues to look upon Pakistan's politicians with contempt. It does not help the political process with that attitude, and General Musharraf certainly enhanced that point of view.
And how would, therefore, I mean, he'd been living in Dubai for some time, obviously, but how would you summarise, a big question, I know, but how would you summarise the country's political outlook here today?
Pakistan's politics is polarized. Pakistan's economy is in free fall. Pakistan has few friends left in the world. On all three counts, things were a little bit better under Musharraf because of his iron hand for the first few years. But because the institutions were not stabilized, things are a mess. Today, he will get, of course, a burial with full military honors, but his long-term legacy will still be of leaving behind a very, very polarized nation instead of helping overcome the divisions that characterized Pakistan's politics and society.
Hussein Haqqani, very many thanks for your time tonight. Thanks for your reflections here on BBC News. A former ambassador for Pakistan to the United States, now director of the Hudson Institute, think tank based in Washington, D.C. And we will bring you continuing coverage of all today's main stories. You are watching BBC News.
This is BBC World News with the latest news and results from around the globe. Sport today.
Hello, I'm Kathy Yarmouth-Seagram and this is Sport Today, live from the BBC Sports Centre. Coming up on the programme, Harry, the history maker. Kane becomes Spurs' all-time top scorer as his side beats Manchester City in the English Premier League. Bayern Munich leapfrog over Union Berlin to return to the top of the Bundesliga with a win over Wolfsburg. And India's Aditi Ashok captures the fourth Ladies European Tour title of her career. Hello there, welcome to the programme. Harry Kane became Tottenham's all-time record scorer, surpassing Jimmy Greaves as his 267th goal for the club dented Manchester City's title ambitions at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. The England captain reached the landmark.
This is BBC News. Welcome, whether you're watching here in the UK or around the globe. I'm Jane Hill. Our top stories. Iranian state television says the country's supreme leader has pardoned thousands of prisoners, including many who had taken part in the recent anti-government demonstrations. New CCTV pictures of the missing Lancashire woman Nicola Bulley have been shared by one of her friends. The images show the 45-year-old in the hours before she went missing next to the River Wyre 9 days ago. The Pope has said the criminalisation of homosexuality is a sin and an injustice. But he added that the Roman Catholic Church couldn't permit same-sex marriages. Union leaders in the UK urged the Prime Minister to intervene in the dispute about healthcare pay. The biggest week of strikes in the history of the National Health Service is due to begin on Monday. The US continues to search for the wreckage of a Chinese balloon suspected of being used for spying, which was brought down by an American fighter jet yesterday. Hello, welcome to BBC World News. Iran's supreme leader is pardoning during the past months of protests. The pardon by Ayatollah Khamenei comes on the eve of the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in 1979, a date on which he regularly offers an amnesty to some prisoners. But the Iranian state media says it does exclude people facing charges of spying for foreign agencies, murder, as well as the destruction or arson of state property. Well, Tehrane Stone is from the BBC's Persian service and says those people being have several conditions attached to their release. Well, what is the background of these pardons, and is there anything unusual about them? I've been talking to Nina Navid, an Iran expert with Amnesty International based here in the UK.
We do usually get
Nina Navid there from Amnesty International. Now, Pope Francis has said laws that criminalise LGBT people are a sin and an injustice, and that people who are attracted to the same sex are children of God. The Pope made the remarks on a plane journey while returning from his historic visit to South Sudan. He said it's not right for some countries to still outlaw same-sex relations. Last month, in an interview, the Pope said homosexuality is not a crime and called on Catholic bishops to welcome LGBTQ+ people into the church. Well, let's discuss the significance of those remarks with Jane Ozanne, who is an LGBT+ campaigner and a member of the General Synod, the Assembly of the Church of England. Jane, how significant are these comments, do you think?
Well, Jane, I think they're very significant. I'm not a Catholic. As you've said, I'm an Anglican who's part of the Church of England's General Synod. But for the leader of the Catholic Church, that global huge body, to come out and say, look, this is not a sin. These are real people. These are people who are loved by God is quite a long way away from the harsh rhetoric we've had over the years. And I think it's part of a trajectory that the Pope has shown constantly since I met him in 2019, of wanting the Catholic Church to be pastoral in its approach. But we've still got a long way to go. You know, we're still saying that the sex between two people of the same sex is sinful and wrong, and that teaching is what can cause so much harm and pain, particularly amongst young LGBT people growing up in churches.
I believe as part of these comments that he made to journalists while they were on this flight back from South Sudan, he did also talk about the issue of marriage, gay people getting married in church, and that is still not something that's possible. So is he trying to balance two things here?
Yes, he's wanting to have it always. In fact, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury, who was on the plane with him, would be in the same boat there. You know, they're trying to be, quote, LGBT friendly, but at the same time saying, well, you're still actually second class. You can't get married. You can't have sex. You can't be, in a relationship that we'll bless. But, if you want to get to Rome, you have to go in steps. And this is a step on the way. I think, if I may, one of the most important things is they had with them the moderator of the Church of Scotland. And he, of course, blesses and performs marriages of LGBT people. And so to be in communion with him, to take him with them on the journey, that too was a strong signal that he was prepared to be with other Christians who hold deeply different views and who are far more progressive in their approach to the LGBT community.
Yes, really interesting. And exactly as you say, yes, he was there with the Archbishop of Canterbury, the moderator of the Church of Scotland, and Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury, noted that the Anglican Church has its own internal divisions over the issue of gay rights. It's very much a continuing conversation, debate, whatever word we want to use. But is your thought fundamentally that being this as frank as they could be is still positive, is something of a step forward?
It is a step forward. You know, we've moved away from telling us that we are completely disordered and that we should be shunned by the church. Both the Archbishop and the Pope were at pains to say that we are children of God and should be welcomed. But we have got a long way to go with seeing that work out in practice. And we have the General Synod next week where we'll be debating this. The critical thing, I think, is whether we learn to accept that people have differing views on this and to respect Christians like myself who believe that God blesses me and wants me to celebrate the love I might have for another woman and who I might want to marry.
Jane Azan, thank you very much. Interesting to hear your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching BBC News. This is BBC News with the latest headlines for viewers in the UK and around the world. Iranian state television says the country's supreme leader has pardoned thousands of prisoners, including many who'd taken part in the recent anti-government demonstrations. New CCTV pictures of the missing Lancashire woman Nicola Bulley have been shared by one of her friends. The images show the 45-year-old in the hours before she went missing next to the River Wyre 9 days ago. Union leaders in the UK urged the Prime Minister to intervene in the dispute about healthcare pay. The biggest week of strikes in the history of the National Health Service is due to start on Monday. The Pope has said the criminalisation of homosexuality is a sin and an injustice, but he added that the Roman Catholic Church couldn't permit same-sex marriages. And also, who will claim the major prizes at this year's Grammy Awards? We'll have what you need to know about music's biggest night. Hello, welcome to BBC News. I'm Jane Hill. Iran's supreme leader is pardoning a large number of prisoners, including some of those arrested during the past months of protests. The pardon by Ayatollah Khamenei comes on the eve of the anniversary of the Islamic Revolution in 1979, a date on which he regularly offers an amnesty to prisoners. But the Iranian state media says this amnesty does exclude people facing charges of spying for foreign agencies, murder, or the destruction of state property. Taraneh Stone is from the BBC's Persian service and says those people freed do have a number of conditions attached to their release.
Or released.
Well, I've also been talking about these pardons to Nina Navid, an Iran expert from Amnesty International.
We do usually get against all those involved in peaceful protests.
The latest there from Amnesty International following those pardons there in Iran. Now, in the UK, the family of Nicola Bulley, who went missing while walking next to the River Wyre in Lancashire, have released new images of her on the morning of her disappearance. Police have said their assumption is that Nicola Bulley fell accidentally into the river. Many members of the local community have again joined the search today for her. A key witness who was walking with a pram close to where she disappeared 10 days ago has now come forward. Here's Danny Savage. Danny Savage reporting from Lancashire. The UK government and the health unions remain far apart on the eve of the biggest health workers' strike so far in England. The two sides remain deadlocked as nurses, paramedics and physiotherapists. Our political correspondent Jonathan Blake has more. Jonathan Blake reporting from Westminster. Well, the former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss has blamed what she's called a powerful economic establishment, as well as a lack of support from the Conservative Party, for her downfall. Liz Truss was forced to resign as Prime Minister after barely 7 weeks, after her package of tax cuts caused panic in the markets and the pound dropped to a record low. The former Conservative Cabinet Minister David Gauke gave us his view on her newspaper article. David Gauke, well, I've been talking to Henry Hill, the deputy editor of the website Conservative Home, and asked him whether David Gauke's assessment of that article was fair.
Essentially, yes.
And the way you're describing all of that, even you know, is it quite bitter? I mean, you're using the word battle, and is it a bitter fight already?
There are deep each other.
Henry Hill, deputy editor of Conservative Home. Pope Francis has said that laws criminalising LGBT people are a sin and an injustice, and that people who are attracted to the same sex are children of God.
To the LGBT community.
Jane Ozanne talking about those comments made by Pope Francis. 3 children and a young woman have died after a boat carrying more than 40 migrants from Turkey capsized. It sank off the Greek island of Leros, according to Coast Guards. Search operations are continuing but are being hampered by strong winds and choppy seas. 41 survivors were rescued, including 6 children. US Navy divers have been working to recover equipment from the Chinese balloon that was shot down off the coast of South Carolina. Our correspondent Barbara Platt-Usher sent us this report from Beijing.
Barbara Platt-Usher, BBC News, Beijing.
Now we are just going to catch up with all the latest sports news. Carthy Nyanis-Egram joins me with that. Hi, Carthy.
Hi, Jane. Thank you very much. Well, Harry Kane, the history maker, becoming Tottenham's all-time record scorer. That's all the sport we have for now. We'll have more for you in the next hour, Jane.
Thanks, Carthy. Thank you very much. Now, the biggest names in the music industry are gathering in Los Angeles for the 65th Grammy Awards. Beyoncé leads the nominations with 9. She could break the record tonight for the most wins in the history of the Grammys. This year, there are an eye-watering 91 categories. Among the contenders for Album of the Year, as well as Beyoncé, are ABBA, Adele and Coldplay. I've been talking to Jem Aswad, who's deputy music editor at Variety, and he told me that though there has been a decline in TV audiences for these award ceremonies, the Grammys are still the peak achievement in the industry.
You know, that shows how much it means.
Jem Aswad, and more from Los Angeles as the night progresses, I'm sure. More from the Grammys to come. Thanks for being with us. You're watching BBC News.
Every day.
World News America.
You're watching BBC News. I'm Jane Hill. These are the headlines. Iranian state television says the country's supreme leader has pardoned thousands of prisoners, including many who took part in the recent anti-government demonstrations. Human rights groups believe 20,000 people have been detained in connection with the protests since mid-September. New CCTV pictures of the missing Lancashire woman Nicola Bulley have been shared by one of her friends. The images show the 45-year-old in the hours before she went missing, while walking next to the River Wyre 9 days ago. The United States wreckage of a Chinese surveillance balloon, which it shot down over the Atlantic on Saturday. Beijing has accused the US of an overreaction. The former president of Pakistan, Pervez Musharraf, has died at the age of 79. He took power in a coup in 1999 and served as president for 7 years from 2001.
Now, On BBC World News, Bettany Hughes heads to the desert-like plains of Gobustan before heading north to Shaki, an important stop for merchants travelling on the ancient Silk Road. Wonders of Azerbaijan.
I'm travelling across the world, exploring secrets and wonders.
This is really tight. So I asked my friends here if they could get me access off the beaten track. And I have 100% definitely got what I asked for.
An adventure by land and sea to the most fascinating places.
It is just extraordinary.
I've been given special access to significant and surprising treasures.
Some of the most remarkable artworks to survive from antiquity.
Buried in ancient